So hopefully that was enjoyable. I hope you're all doing well and feeling however you're feeling. All of the above, as it's often described. We can feel many emotions simultaneously at the same time, and when we're not so identified with emotions as the core of our experience, um, or as our identity, we're very actually more welcoming of all the emotions that can come, um, and reveal to us, what is just available for further healing, because it's so easy for the conscious mind to accept the belief that uh, there's some sort of arrival that has occurred. Maybe you've gone through something challenging, or you accomplished something great, or finished some project, and there's a kind of a new foundation or a new arrival that feels like, oh, this is this new awareness I have, or I've arrived at this certain place, or I'm not going to deal with these elements of suffering or challenge anymore, blah, yada yada yada. And then life often has a way to reveal us other ways in which that humility is required, for us to essentially accept the perpetual unknown. So as soon as the conscious mind is thinking that it's got everything together, not that it can't have some things together, but it has everything together, like every possibility it has together, well then often we're brought back into the realities of the forces of the universe that are far beyond everything that we could conceive. So we go with those waves, and this is why all of the above is a very accurate description, I feel, to feeling states. Um, so yeah, so if there's any comments or initial shares in the comment box you'd like to share, or questions throughout, feel free. As most of it's a pretty open space here. We are going to get into a bit of a practice. I know that I was making some comments yesterday on Instagram and Facebook about, my personal sharings of teachings of non-duality and Advaita and these types of perspectives. Obviously, I know that a lot of people who have come to these teachings, at least what I'm sharing in these various platforms, are some very specifically coming for that purpose, or coming with the intention of hearing more about these things. Some of you other topics, because I do share quite a broad range, and it's just the nature of how my journey has gone. I've explored so many different topics, and continue to. And I really, I would perish of boredom before I would ever focus on only one one subject. It's just not in my field, at least for not like a really extended period of time. Obviously, with some of the courses, we had the level 1, which we'll be doing again, which is a lot on the food and the detoxification, clearing out the gut brain so that the heart brain and the head brain can be also on a great foundation and clear, and feeling well. Obviously, that's a bit of a focalized intention, and we're going into another level 2 program, which many are coming into from the first one, which was which really anyone can jump in at any time, but it's really addressing the shadow body, addressing the shadow self, addressing the emotional trauma elements within our being, and how that all relates to very specifically the non-dual path. Because one of my kind of repetitive conversations when it comes to non-dual teachings is the lack of a lot of these other subjects that are actually quite important within the whole of the conversation, and I feel that this is only really possible for someone to be sharing more of a broad ranged smorgasbord of topics in conjunction with non-duality only after a longer period of integration has occurred. Once a non-dual realization or a self-realization stage, some of these stages have stabilized, to the point where it feels like there's a mountain-like peacefulness or stability in the knowing of self, in the knowing of what all of these non-dual pointers are pointing to. But even as that occurs, it takes quite a long time for that to stabilize. And often what has occurred, I know it did for me, was the non-dual teachings become very crystallized and very, someone's usually very excited about them. So it becomes the real focal point, on where basically everything that comes out of, I know for a period of time, everything that came out of my mouth really was just about non-duality and Advaita and all this. And so it becomes kind of like really focalized on this teaching, which is very relevant and extremely powerful. But there's many other components that actually start to weave in there, and again, can only really occur once there's a longer period of integration, right? And specifically an integration into the compassion of God, and the dropping into the heart and dropping into the gut. And so this is why when I speak to the level 2 course and the focus on, and not just the course itself, so much of what I've shared has been on this, and so many of the free meditations and all the stuff we've done have been how do we piercingly identify charges within our body, and usually they're going to be found in the torso region, and usually going to be connected to some emotional experience. How are we targeting is kind of the word, but yeah, focalizing our attention upon these charges and bringing them into neutralization, and also giving space and time, that self-love, that self-compassion for the processing of these energies to reveal themselves. Because, if we approach emotional healing from the lens of, I'm going to do something with this emotion, it's very kind of mechanical and like surgical in many ways. It can come onto the side of exactly what actually doesn't support in the healing of emotional trauma or emotional charges. Because if everything is coming from that place of control and manipulation, we're not really actually respecting the time period that is required for the processing of emotion, like some of the real deeper ones, like things like grief, and guilt from certain actions or shamefulness and all these things. These things require time to pass, because it's just the nature of choice and consequence. It's the nature of the movements of cycles, right? Like if we're experiencing grief, often, say we've lost a job, or we've lost somebody, or we've changed a location in our life, or we're moving away. Grief is a natural emotion that is going to arise, and it's not really something that can be rushed. It's something that can be made more graceful, but it's certainly not a process that can be rushed, because just like a flower blooming, the blooming of guilt or shame or grief is not really any different. The process is very similar. It's being able to set the proper environment so the blooming of how this energy is revealing something more deeper to you. Like for instance, when we feel grief, often we experience also simultaneously a feeling of deep appreciation, right? A feeling of deep appreciation and gratitude for this place we lived, or this job we had, or this person now that has passed. There's an expansion of this energy that also comes with that, and that will only really be possible to flourish as we've been willing to feel the depths of said grief, right? It comes one comes with the other. So it's no different with like a feeling of guilt. If we've done something unrighteous, right, naturally we're going to feel guilt for it, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Actually, it's a great blessing, because in that receiving of what you're feeling is it's a guidance post, it's a guidepost of saying, oh well, this is unrighteous, this is incorrect, it is not the way for this being. So as that emerges, if there's an avoidance of it, then we go on and do the same thing again later. But if there's really a sinking into it, and again feeling the appreciation of this lesson, or feeling the compassion, maybe now, right, we're feeling this guilt, and now we sink into a deep level of empathy and compassion to the being that we may have affected. And it doesn't mean it's always malicious, but it's just that's the guidance. It's the guidance system. It's a beautiful guidance system. So when we take principles like non-dual investigation, vipassana, self-inquiry, these types of processes, a lot of the teachings are usually primarily, or at least initially, focused on dissolution or dissolving of these charges, right? There's a purpose of doing the self-inquiry or in the investigation to dissolve this charge, obviously because it's uncomfortable, or obviously because it's creating suffering, or it's strengthening the sense of identity. And the more sense we have, the more of a sense of a false identity that we have, the more suffering that we experience. Like if we only think ourselves as this body and mind, then obviously we're going to experience suffering, because we actually are the entirety of creation. And instead we're just fixated on this one little, being and body and life and all the happenings. And so we take everything personally, and everything is, poor me or poor them or this and that. And it's just this endless drama. But when we come to dissolve the charges, the expansion of our identity will naturally, it's kind of like, I don't know how to explain, it's like, it's just kind of like an energy or an essence, or even just air. If air is locked in a certain container, but you unblock the barriers of that container, naturally the air will just naturally expand to the next layer of the container. And then when you unblock or unlock, that layer of the container, then it will expand to the next layer. And so the process of awakening, ascension, bioregenesis, and healing, just the natural path of this spiritual nature, is essentially dissolving the layers of identity, which are those containers, right? Or dissolving the layers of solidity, right? The solidity that we feel as a separate self in the world, separate from other beings, the separate body, separate from God, separate from the universe, separate, So as we actually investigate these so-called boundaries to our identity, right? Or boundaries to which are made from trauma and charge. Because the more traumatic influences we have in the body, the more difficult it is to feel oneness or to feel unified with the whole, because every time the energy looks to expand, it expands through those traumas, and then it instantly kind of contracts us back. That's essentially what happens when we have left those things unchecked. So we may be feeling this expansion, but then we hit these kind of blocks within our anatomy, which is not just this body's, it's a multidimensional anatomy. And then it instantly contracts back. So we're contracted back into that identity. And any of us may feel this, even just coming to these sessions, right? You may have gone the week where you start to feel that contraction a bit more and a bit more, things in your day or happenings, relationships, job situations. And then you go into the meditation, you expand, you move through things, you really kind of soothe these charges. And all of a sudden, it's like you've instantly come back home again. You're like, wait a minute. For the whole week I felt contracted, or I felt so separate or so down. And then, and not just doing it here, but even on your own meditation cushion, or anything that brings you back into that space, you see what happens when that contraction or when that expansion is present, right? So we can see the importance of why we have to address these things and do it in a methodical way. And it's often why I've explained the pitfalls with a lot of intensive work that's very extreme, and it's very pushing of the pendulum, like intensive psychedelic work, or extreme practices of fasting, or extreme practices of meditation and spiritual practice that are kind of out of the ordinary for your natural flow. Obviously, I teach all these things, but the way that I have attempted to at least communicate them is how we do things in methodical ways, and ways in which we're not expanding too fast, because we will contract back equally as fast. It's just inevitable. So, when you have people that go on these real intensive, expansive psychedelic trips, sometimes for weeks or months or even years, then they will generally have, and I know this was the case for me, and I've noticed it for many people, a very intensive period of contraction, because the energy, like that example I gave, the energy is expanding, and you're expanding into all these realms and all the colors and all the visuals and the I don't know, everything. And but then that energy is moving through all of the stuck points within the anatomy. So it will contract back at some point, and sometimes it's very hard, like an elastic band, because again, the expansion happened, like so fast, and then boom, it kind of comes back, right? So we have to be very mindful with this, in the sense that we can't run. You cannot run, you cannot hide from your own self. There's nowhere to go. So whatever engagement of a practice or a system or a teaching or listening to a teacher or doing a course or whatever, the intensity in which you go into it is certainly the efficiency that you could move through it. Like intensity and focus brings efficiency, but we also have to be aware that that intensity and that focus will it's like pain in is pain out. You know, if you're using that focus and intensity to resolve intensity of pains and suffering that you have contributed to in some way in bringing into your life, then naturally you will have to face that same pain that came in, that on the way out, as it's healing and as it's releasing. So this is why it's best for us to approach things in that very subtle and methodical way, and doing things in incremental fashion, but consistent fashion over an extended period of time. This is what builds us up for the long term, right? It builds us up for the long term, because there is no real shortcut. There is no shortcut. There are more efficient paths and more efficient processes, but there's certainly no shortcut. So yeah, cool topic. Very relevant, and it's certainly very relevant, especially for the non-dual community, because I know I went through the phase of like a couple of years of just watching every non-dual video I possibly could, going from non-dual video to non-dual video, looking for direct teachings, and the Muji and the Rupert Spira and the I don't know, there's so many, so many different, and you're just going, and you're just looking to find that like secret sauce, that secret phrase that's just gonna shift it all. And sometimes it happens, sometimes you hear something someone says and it just shifts you, and it almost permanently sometimes, right? But that is still quite rare, because really someone who that happens for, they're ripe and ready already. You're going to be ripe and ready already if that's what's happening. So in the meantime, we live our lives, we live our lives in methodical and patient ways. We enjoy our experience the best of our ability. So many people on in non-dual paths, not just non-dual, but spirituality, are not even actually really enjoying the process. It's like they just want to get to the end. It's like I just want to get to final liberation. I just want to get there. But you can really enjoy wherever you're at, no matter where you're at. And yes, you're still going to experience things, and stuff's going to happen, whatever. But we can move at a pace and in a way where we're addressing the whole of our life. So many of us have been born into Western worlds, modern daily lives, householder lives. It may not still be the same as maybe a past life where you were in the cave, you know what I mean? Or you were at the ashram all the time, or, you know what I mean? Or you were born into a spiritual, system, and that was the entirety of your life and childhood, and that's how you grew up. It's not to say that this can happen, or this is not what you can choose in this life. What I'm just addressing is we want to really view our lives in that holistic manner, and understand that just if we focalize all our attention on non-duality, like that can certainly bring a lot of benefit. Just like any tradition you want to really zone in on, or any system, you're going to bring yourself great benefit, and at the same time you could bring yourself even potentially more benefit by balancing it with the whole of your life, like the natural whole of your life, that no matter how much you try and avoid is still there. Like you have a child, or you have a job that, you're still in and you're not leaving anytime soon, or you have some other responsibility of service, or some other passion, maybe there's a creative endeavor you love. There's a business that you're running that you enjoy. You love art, you love music, you love all these things. These things do not need to be replaced by, 100% soul, nonstop spiritual seeking. That is inevitably what your path will become, because it's not a system, it's not a teaching, it's not one particular practice. It's the devotion, it's the energy, it's that ultimate desire that floods every aspect of your life. Every aspect of what you do becomes this. This is what's more important of the focus. And then yes, that may bloom as you just going all in. I can't be the one to tell you yes or no as to what that looks like, or, to do it or to do it, or to put all your eggs in a certain basket. Everyone's going to learn on their own path in this regard. And to be honest, the past decade for me has been pretty much 100% focus. but it doesn't mean there's not other aspects of our life experience that unfold. And for some of us, this is quite obvious, but for some, it may not be, or it's just a good reminder, right? And yeah, and this is why the Buddha's teaching was the middle way as his first teaching. His first teaching was the middle way, and this is essentially what is being described here, is that everything we're resting in a certain balance, where we're bringing everything into balance, everything that we engage, everything, every fractal of our life, whether it's our job, our family life, our meditation practice, our food engagements, our businesses, our creative endeavors, everything we engage in is done so in a way where we're perpetually coming back to a sense of balance. And this is not so foreign. We may have conditioned our nervous system, conditioned our mind, our psyche, our emotions to adore the dramas of the highs and lows, the extremes, the peaks and valleys, and the never-ending drama of that. That may be the conditioning that's felt in the nervous system and in the emotional body and these things. But that's not that. We still do know what peacefulness and balance feels like. That's why we seek it out. We go to the beach, we take a walk in the forest, we sit with our dog, or we hug our child. We sit in meditation, we listen to some good music like we just have. I hope it was good. And we rest in that, and in that we instantly connect back. Oh yeah, this is that balance. This is that balance. And then we go back out, and I don't know, we're working in the yard, or we're at our job, or we're cooking dinner, and then we may feel that contraction again, where we're holding our breath, or we're trying to get it done, or we're moving like kind of overly fast, or we're being a bit lethargic. We're just kind of being lazy with it, not caring. We can see how these energies then manifest when we kind of almost just even for a moment forget about what we've just come back to, this reminder, this remembrance. So I hope this lands and is understood, because it's a fundamental, it's such a basic principle in teaching, but it's the supreme basic. It's the supreme basic teaching. That's not a paradox. It's the supreme basic teaching. Like the golden rule, as I've shared many times, the golden rule is that entry-level spiritual teaching among all traditions. It's something that everyone can understand, even if they don't want to understand it. But at least they logically can. But it's also it's the supreme teaching. It's the teaching of non-dual, non-duality. I mean, non-duality is the epitome, the crescendo of non-duality is found in the golden rule, to treat another as a desire to be treated, because there's no one other but yourself. Everyone is yourself in a certain sense, right? Yeah, nice. So quite a long opening message before we go into a bit of a meditation. If there's there's a chat. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the chat. Oh, just a heart. Nice. Okay. Hopefully that lands for everyone. If there's any questions on this or comments before we get into the practice, then I'm open to that, because it's quite a topic. Yeah, but hopefully quite clear. It's not something I feel any of us have not heard before, or have not considered, or are not already practicing. It's just simply an endless reminder. I feel the best teachings are the ones we actually need endless amounts of times. It's not something we just grasp one time. And because when we're speaking to teachings in this regard, any teaching that embodies a certain level of truth, it's kind of like, it's a really interesting way. It's a fascinating way to describe this or converse about this topic. But when we're talking about like these various teachings, what we're actually speaking to is aspects of our template. So when I'm speaking these various things, or when any teacher is, and it's resonating on that level of knowing, what's actually happening is you're traversing your own anatomy. It's like say like the golden rule is found in your left index finger. When you hear about the golden rule, it's almost like you're traversing your consciousness into your left index finger, because it's actually encrypted within your anatomy. So when we look at all spiritual teachings and we see that all spiritual teachers of these various traditions, say like these great masters, were translating the same almost frameworks or blueprints. Like they were basically saying the same thing, but just in different ways. But they were basically explaining the same blueprint. What they're actually describing to you is their own template. And so they're describing to you your own anatomy. It's like if they were just saying to you, oh, you have a hand and you have a forearm and you have a bicep and you have a torso and you have legs and you have a heart and you have lungs and all they're doing is describing your anatomy. So when we're describing like teachings, like say a particular principle or a virtue or a particular meditative practice or a mantra, just some perception, we're just going deeper into the template. We're going deeper into the anatomy. So we're describing more of what the anatomy actually is, right? So when we say, oh, you have a heart, you're like, yeah, I have a heart. I know I have a heart. So I know that's true. So when someone says, be nice to people, you actually connect to that aspect within your template or anatomy, and you realize, oh yeah, that's part of my anatomy. That's part of my being. I know that's what it is. And then it's received. So when any teaching, is coming forward, that's within that blueprint, within that organic blueprint, that Christic blueprint, you're connecting to and reconnecting and healing through remembrance your anatomy, right? Your template. That's essentially what all of life is. So everything in life is this. We go about our engagements and say we see something that's distorted or what is so-called unrighteous or evil. Well, what's actually happening is when we see that and we feel the dissonance or the lack of resonance with that, what's actually happening is we're going through our organic template and we're seeing that's not there, right? This aspect of evil is actually not within the organic template. And so because of that, you can actually remember your organic template because you realize, oh yeah, this is not an aspect of the true way. And so this has to be healed because it's going to activate within you the aspect of, say, the inorganic template, right? The inorganic aspects within your being, that you may still be carrying. And of course you are, because there's some sort of observation, you're engaging it, in some way. So then when we go in and actually engage that, right? So say like we watch a movie and it activates a lot of these kind of dark things in us. That's actually a beautiful thing. Because what's happening is it's activating within you a healing process. So that aspect of yourself can be revealed. And then you come back and see, oh yeah, that's it's like if you had a piece of metal in your body, and it's very much, sometimes they're like metal jagged pieces or jagged pieces of like glass. They will be perceived that way multidimensionally, and they are lodged within the template in very nasty ways. So when we are observing something and it activates that remembrance, we will feel that implant or that energy release and heal, and we'll start to see the healing process that emerges and viscerally be able to observe and feel that. And that's a very powerful thing. So we're not really to run away from anything or shun ourselves from any of the darkness that we perceive on this planet, because it's all actually, it all is in service and supportive to the further activation and releasing within our being. So we have to be mindful, obviously, with where we're at and how much we can handle. And it's actually sometimes, you could be watching a movie. I know my friend Christina would talk to me about this often, and has taught me this in that regard, in the sense that, say you're watching a movie or a show and you start to feel that those energies or those things, sometimes you need to take a break. You need to pause it and go for a walk or take some breaths, or because it's very important we give space so that processing can occur. We're not overwhelming ourselves. Say we're binging on a show and there's all this stuff starting to come up. I know there's many shows I've had this experience with, or music or many things. I've talked to you guys about this many times now, about media and its power for healing. But yeah, all of life is this in this regard. But I hope that clears up a bit more, right? When you're tuning into what's of resonance and what's not, you're actually tuning into your multidimensional template, and you're basically coming to we're all becoming masters in discernment. That's essentially what this is. Masters in discernment. So if originally you would feel that piece of jagged metal in your body and you'd think, oh yeah, that's a part of my body. That's literally the perception of, a vast majority of the population, where there isn't an awareness as to these inorganic implants and parasites and lodgings and toxicity and distortions and influence that's within the template. But as there's more of a realignment with the organic structure, or the organic self, the true self, then there's a very clear observation of what is self and what is not, right? And what is essentially designed to be dissolved back into God source. Because yes, everything is made from the fabric of God source, but not everything has been crystallized or materialized as that. This is important to understand. So there is a duty in us being clear and discerning about the engagements of our life experience, because it's like this laptop is not my third arm. So if I went around thinking, well, this laptop is my third arm, this is a delusion, right? Just like if we walked around thinking unrighteous behavior is okay, that's a delusion, right? It's okay within the container of God source, but it's not something that we even need to address as okay. It's like we don't go around saying, oh yeah, it's okay to kill children, it's okay, it's all part of God's. No, you just don't. That's just not what it is, right? We already know it's okay within the eyes of God's source, because that's just what it is. So because that's the case, that never needs to be reiterated in our mind again. Actually, every time we observe anything of that nature, we would instantly, absolutely look to stop that, right? That would be someone who has embodied the non-dual teaching, not just crystallized it in their mind and walks around thinking about non-duality. So we can see the very clear difference between what happens when there's integration from a true awakening, or when there's still kind of conceptualization of awakening or conceptualization of spirituality, right? Like any of us who may have conceptualized a certain virtue, but then the question of whether we're actually living that in our life is then up for question. Are we honest about our engagement with that virtue, right? Or are we just presenting ourselves as, this virtue? See, so yeah, that's a very practical point, and I think it's a very practical point, especially in this time, because we're coming to a time now where everything is being revealed on the physical plane, and that's why there's so much division. And in that division, it requires very clear knowing of what is true and what is not. And if there isn't a clear knowing of what is true or not, we get lost in the ping-ponging of sides. And we don't really know where we're at or what we're doing or what our perception is or this or that. There's kind of just like it's just this airy-fairiness. And that's not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. Just like we can observe in our own life, if we have conflict, it has to be addressed, right? If there's conflict, if there's anything going on in our experience and relationship, in relationship with anything, a person, place, a thing, a job, if there's dissonance, if there's feeling of conflict, it has to be addressed, it has to be communicated, it has to be practically looked at. And has to is a strong word. You can choose to, and if you don't, naturally just continue. So it's more of a question as to, are we really here to resolve what we're here for? And the answer, I would say, for everyone is yes, but whether we've accepted this or come to see this, or if we're ready to look at that, that's a bit of a different story, obviously. But yeah, cool. Feels good to me. All right. Well, this session has already been quite a practice. I'm sure we can feel, but we will go into a bit of meditation now, unless there's any lingering questions or comments on that. Nice. Okay. Well, we will just come into this. I don't feel like I'm going to guide too much. I don't know. I never really know. So we'll just kind of close our eyes and come into this, because a lot of profound energies kind of moving forward today. So we can just kind of take a moment to rest in all that. Whether the eyes are open or closed, it may not change too much, but sometimes the eyes closed will help us focus and get deeper. And the initial focal point will just be upon the sensations arising within this message. And you may feel this, around the center of the torso, maybe around the heart or the azare, the thymus area, maybe even the gut, but it could be anywhere in the body. And we can just really give our presence to ourselves, just exactly what is here as it's here. Nothing to do really, just to be here. And here we're really sinking into the presence of whatever sensations arising, but not in a way where we're observing it from a distance. We're seeing that every sensation that's arising, we're actually already instantly there. And it's actually us that's manifesting. We are arising as this sensation and that sensation and this sensation and that sensation. So it's not like we're sitting back being mindfully aware of a sensation, like we're observing the object of a sensation. Instead, we're just entertaining the perception that we are the sensation. So there's no observation actually happening. Instantly, as a sensation arises, we are that. So if there's this openness, this joyfulness, we are this joy, we are this peacefulness, we are this charge, we are this sound, we are this itchiness, we are this light, we are this vibration in the body, this frequency, we are this movement. So there's no distance between anything and anything, really. So in this sense, there's no bounds of what we view to be ourselves, whether the sensations perceivingly outside the body, inside the body, in the middle, whether it's in some other dimension or this physical dimension, whether it's a thought or an emotion or just a sensation in the physical body, like on the skin or itchiness or something like this. So in this sense, there's no eyes or view that's only pointing forwards. The view can be 360 degrees, any direction. There's look backwards, look forwards, because there's no real center point in where it's looking from. We can traverse anywhere within the template because the moment it arises, we're already there. The moment of perception arises, we're already there. The moment of feeling arises, we're already there. The moment the energy arises, we're already there. Frequency, sound, light, it's all the same. So there's a freedom here because we're not taking ownership over everything or anything. There's not an owner or someone observing that owns the objects of these sensations. It's just a thought. It's not your thought. It's just a feeling. It's not your feeling. It's not your sensation. It's just a sensation. And so this is repeated endlessly. There's no limit to this because we're not afraid from this sense of anything. Everything is us. Everything, we're arising as everything. You're arising as this thought, this feeling, the sensation, whether it's the darkest feeling, the darkest thought, or the most joyful, lightest thought and feeling, it's all equally you, equally welcomed, equally well, on some level, we're actually even dissolving the sense of welcoming it because again, we're instantly it. The moment arises, we're it. It's there, it's us. No distance, no separation. So we consider here how freeing this really is because there's nothing to be afraid of here. Everything that's ever experienced is going to be in the form of a thought, feeling, or sensation. So if everything is already us, if we're already there with everything, we can't run from it, we can't hide from it, we could never escape it anyway. So, well, then the fear just naturally can drop away. So a number of things can naturally progress from this process, and certainly as we have our own time and endless amount of space individually to practice as long as we'd like, and we can continue to obviously today as long as you like. But this process continue to expand endlessly because endless amounts of sensation, thoughts, feelings continue to arise. And so it's almost like we're continuing to zoom in, and it's like thousands, millions, billions, trillions of thoughts, feelings, sensations just arise on the micro level. And so in this sense, we're expanding into the cosmic mind, the universal mind, the higher mind, the higher self. And so we move beyond some of the more, personally identified thoughts, feelings, sensations, and start to connect to that cosmic intelligence. This is where we can access those higher visions and creativity and perceptions and awareness and knowledge and insight and wisdom, because we are already all of it. So accessing it is just a process of remembering that. So having those consistent streams of intelligence and wisdom and guidance is not necessarily coming in the form of some voice or some angel or some being that is there to guide you, but rather your own innate knowing, your own innate and a trusting in this knowing by, again, becoming this energy, becoming this. It's kind of like a baby, your own baby. Anyone who's a parent will know that you naturally are to trust your own child just from the get-go. There's no need to develop trust in this child, just like the child with you. Now that trust can be broken if we create separation, but the more we remember the reality of what the relationship is, we start to see that is more illusionary than we may have thought at times in our life. So we can see how simple this practice is, but how daunting it also can be, because to accept that this painful sensation or thought or feeling is also you equally as the joyful sensation or feeling or perception, this requires not only an intensive amount of concentration and focus, but a willingness and a surrender to the potential flaming fire or the eruption of what that sensation and feeling may, feel like. But this is okay. And just like anything, it simply takes practice. So some of us may feel complete here or may have already done so. So we can open the eyes whenever we feel. Some of us may want to continue. So that'll be welcomed as well. We'll take our time. There's any comments or things that want to be shared on what we've just explored here? Very simple, but quite profound practice. Feel free to do so. So to clarify a couple things here, naturally, initial stages of meditation will guide us through a process of observation, mindful observation, right? So we are when we are closing our eyes, I mean, already when you close your eyes as a meditator in the initial stages of awakening, right? The entry level stages of awakening or awareness are simply coming to the reality that, or the recognition that when you close your eyes, if your whole life you observed yourself to be this mind and body, and you observe objects like this laptop or this Kleenex or the outdoors and the bird, as objects to the subject of this mind and body. When you close your eyes and then all of a sudden you're starting to observe the object of thoughts and feelings and sensations, you start to realize instantly that's an awakening, because anyone who's solely materially identified and closes their eyes and sees that, well, the brain can't see itself, like the eyes cannot see itself. So if there's an observation of what's happening within the mind, within the emotions, within the sensations, then obviously must be something observing that. So this is where the awareness of consciousness or the awareness of awareness emerges. But the deeper stages from this is as we're engaging in this practice of being aware, we're constantly, I'm aware of this feeling, let it pass, just let it pass, let it pass. Well, this is also somewhat illusionary, because the reality is that what we're observing is actually us. We're not observing really anything. What's actually occurring is that whatever's arising, that is God's source arising as itself to itself. So that is us arising as ourselves to ourselves. So whatever thoughts emerging or feelings emerging or sensations emerging, it's arising and collapsing independently. There's nothing over here. It's not like we're over here observing it. We're actually the one blooming as it. So when you change this perception, you actually go into meditation and you realize, because when you're coming from this lens, there's still a sense of control. You can decide whether or not you want to, play with this or not, or these things. Instead, when you start to emerge as it, the emergence as it recognizes, well, I cannot run from any of what's arising. Anything that's arising within this being, I'm going to be it, and 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 I'm going to be it. And so then it's not this center point of observation. You're actually arising as everything within consciousness, within the field. And so this naturally will dissipate a sense of fear, because the only sense of fear that we'll have is as a separate self, that we want to observe some things, or we want to be with some things, and we don't want to be with other things. And we're kind of trying to manipulate and control reality. So it's still an awakened level, but it's still a path that is still, there's still suffering that is happening there. And many people on the spiritual path are generally in that range, right? A lot of people are into mindfulness, into observation, into, using the breath and letting things go, letting things pass, all that. But the reality is, you can dance around the spiritual fire all you want, but at a certain point you got to jump in. And this is what happens when we do this style of practice. So it can be kind of confusing initially. You may not be able to sense the difference, but over time, when you really start to just surrender and it's like a doing of nothing almost, you're surrendering all the sense of even observing, and you're literally just it. Whatever's there, you are it. Whatever thought, you are it. Whatever sensation, you are it. Whatever, it's just you're it. And it's like a constant, and it's a constant surrendering of the sense of separation, like the idea that, oh, I got to let this thought go. That's actually what you got to let go, not the thought. You got to let go of the idea that you're letting go of anything, because this is kind of funny. It's kind of like saying the tree lets go of the leaf. That's not really what happens. The leaf just falls off. The tree isn't like, oh, I'm going to let go of this leaf now. There may be an intelligence of communication happening on some level, yeah, but really the leaf just falls off. It's really simple. So in the same way, we arise as the thought, we collapse as the thought, we arise as the emotion. So everything is just happening. We arise and it's happening, we arise and it's happening. And there is still a free will within that, because most of us are not doing what I'm describing already. So of course there's a free will to engage this in a new way. And that's where things get, more complex, but also, on some level more simple, the more advanced the process unfolds. Right. So, if there's any questions on that, I mean, it's quite an advanced conversation, but I feel like, it can be communicated in simple ways, and we don't need to understand it. We just need to practice what I'm engaging, and what we've engaged here, and yeah. So let me check on YouTube. If there's any Hans is saying, Adi Ashanti says, close the gap. Yeah, yeah. On a certain level, you're closing the gap of subject object. But if you really investigate, like with a real if you really investigate with a real deep level of concentration, you'll see there's no gap. There's no gap. It's all just up. It's rising. It's happening. It's rising. It's rising. And so free, because then everything's just happening and rising, and you're not really you don't really need to control and manipulate everything. And just like if you when you take the rocks out of a stream, the stream just naturally then flows on its own. Like you're not having to like guide the water as well. It's like, oh, I got to remove the rocks, and then step 2, I got to like put my hands in the water. It's like, not really. The water's just gonna go on its own, right? Mary's saying, I really appreciate this experience as our intimate wisdom, not some being or other. I like that we are instantly yet not only in observation, we are not separately observing. This is what I'm paraphrasing from what you're saying. It seems to make a lot of resonance to me, and I feel very happy. It allows the permission to just be, yeah, for sure. The leaf example. This is a key piece that you wrote, Mary. I feel I can embody whatever it is in the moment and be okay. And be okay with it, right? Exactly. That's all it really is. Just everything is what it is. That simple phrase that you'd see on a like a poster like this, kind of like I don't know, like something from like Winners or Walmart. Like, it is what it is. Like just like a typical simple meme. It's actually so accurate. Like one of the most accurate statements. It is what it is. Because that's it is. You can't even define whatever you're observing. You really could never define what it is. You could use words to describe it, but it is what it is, and it's a felt sense. It's a resonance. It has an encryption, right? So it's not about dissolving into this like unknown, because in the spiritual community, it's kind of a common thing to say like, oh, nothing about the mind is true. It's all false. It's all illusion. It's not really accurate, because it's like a beautiful statement in Kelantic prayer. I'm humble yet knowing. I am humble yet knowing. I am humble yet knowing. What does this mean? It means I can be open to receive any knowledge or wisdom, but yet I still know what is true. And this is how we can engage our life experience, right? We can be humble and resting in the unknown and possibility and all that, but yet we still have an innate knowing as to what's true and what we do know for certain. Like, I know I have hands. I don't need to walk around thinking like, oh, do my hands even exist? Are my hands even there? It's like these kind of conversations have no real validity other than just for the exploration of them. But if we really start to get into that, it can just start getting unnecessary and inefficient, right? I'm just kind of thinking about things that don't really matter, right? So yeah. Mary says, yeah, like being the teacher and the student at the same time. Very much so. Very, very much so. You can see my post on Facebook about that yesterday, about the generations, constantly experiencing generational shifts, elders, the kind of adult generation. Then you have the child generation. And it's constant crossing over of these generations and a constant passing down of these generations within the genetic lineage of the human race. But then if we look at the higher dimensional lineage of our race lines that go throughout this time matrix and internal co-creation, we're basically communicating with many layers of councils and universes and stars. We're receiving the intelligence from the stars. We have our sun here, but there's many stars within a creation, and each of us may be from a particular star. Some of us are connected to the star of Eartha, because Earth's true name is Eartha, and at least in this dimensional space, and Eartha is a star, and so it appears as this physical planet, but it's actually a star. So some of us are actually from this star, but some of us are from other eternal stars within creation. And those stars are what we communicate with, because that's who we are. So we're constantly receiving it's not hierarchical. It's just a downstepping of communication and knowledge. And it downsteps endlessly. Again, it goes up and it's a constant communication and transference of wisdom and information that we're always receiving. From the elders, from the young generations, from the councils, and from, lower dimensional beings, right? It's like, it's all kind of a constant communication. And by lower dimension, I mean like, the trees and the animals and these types of beings, right? So yeah, constant transference of knowledge. So I'm feeling I'm feeling good with this. I mean, I don't know if there's too many more questions. I did want to make another reminder and note on a couple things. The level 2 course for I mean, even if you haven't done level 1 on the detox front, I would still recommend this process, because it's not, you don't need to be having done the cleansing. It's just an additional benefit. And likely when you get into emotional healing stuff, as many of you already have, you naturally do want to go through periods of less is more consumption with the food anyway. So it's all in conjunction. But I'm gonna link the level 2 course that's going to be starting up soon, that you guys can check out. So we'll be doing all the recordings are already available for you guys to start right away. But then we will be doing some live calls as well. So, so that'll be something that you guys can check out. If you want to contribute just for today, I'll put some links as well. Some are having issues with PayPal, so I have a Stripe link that you can use. It's easier. So I'll put those links too. That's always appreciated. And there's another question here. Someone's saying something on YouTube. Let me see. Unrelated, but I'm curious if you have thoughts on spirituality and hair, and if your experience perception there is a significant relationship, and if there's a difference for men and women. Well, if we look at just the kind of the natural energy of the natural intuitive wisdom of women, and many of the kind of more spiritual or metaphysical, like indigenous and spiritual tradition views on hair, which very much and often would relate to the idea that, our hair is an extension of our nervous system. It adds to our sensitivity of our environment. It adds to our connection to intuitive knowing, and a connection to our feminine essence as well. You start to see the connection. You start to connect the dots a little bit, right? Where, most, not all women, but a lot of women have longer hair. Women in general are going to be more connected to nature, more sensitive, more, at least if we're speaking on true femininity, true feminine principles. Femininity has been, there's been many attempts to change the definition of femininity these days, but the essence of it will never change. It will just be attempted to be defined or culturally defined differently. And so when we look at, that connection with women, and we see that, well, when we see the male figures in, say, some indigenous cultures, for instance, where, the sacredness of growing out hair was always revered. It was such an important aspect to the process, and very much a connection to how men could also develop these qualities, right? And how maybe culturally that wasn't generally the case. And so when you look at, the more disciplined path of military life or monkhood, which generally would require the shaving of the head, that would generally signify a couple things. On some level, it signifies an element of obedience, and that obedience to the guru or to the drill sergeant, but on another level, it's actually for one to be able to develop more of the masculine traits. That's generally what would be required, right? Where you would develop those masculine traits, because you're going to be more connected in with that physical self and the masculine energy. And in various martial art traditions, for instance, the development of the male energy would be yang first, upwards around age 30, and then the yin energy or the yang energy would be developed, post 30. And that's where, like, that's usually what would happen, like kung fu temples, in martial arts temples, where the females is usually different, right? Females will develop their femininity, in those early years, and then in the later years would develop more of those masculine traits, as a mother, as an elder, as a grandmother, as a leader, right? So that's more in the Taoist tradition, how they would view it. And I do relate with that in many ways. That's how my path kind of unfolded, right? And so in the growing of my own hair, I'm not dogmatic about this, because there are many great masters or traditions, like in the Zen tradition, various Buddhist traditions, that don't necessarily view it the same when it comes to the hair, or they do not view it as significant. But their energy was a little bit different. Some of the Buddhist cultures were a bit different. than some of the shamanic cultures or some of the indigenous cultures, where they may have been more connected with nature in certain ways, and it was more practical for them to have those levels of sensitivity, being in the forest, navigating things and hunting, and just a different lifestyle, right? But you will see a common theme among many older masters, where the hair will inevitably be left to grow, both the head hair and the facial hair. And it was both a process of demonstration of detachment, also a demonstration of detachment with physical appearance, but also a representation of wisdom, right? Where the hair wouldn't actually turn gray, it would turn more of like a white or a gold. And that was like the signification of the kind of activation of the frequency of the currents that were happening within that being's body. So there's many conversations with this, right? I know for myself personally, like I said, I'm not dogmatic on anyone wants to do with their hair. It's all good. I do sometimes think that people, like, not only are people potentially dogmatic with the growing of hair, they're also dogmatic with the cutting of hair. Like, oh, I got to we just have to be very authentic with how something's happening, not being influenced by what someone else is doing or why they're doing it. I mean, yeah, we have to heed guidance and we can be inspired, but sometimes people kind of go along with trends with their hair, right? Like anything with appearance, we go along with trends, which isn't necessarily like invalid, because trends do represent changes of consciousness collectively as well. But sometimes we just kind of get in our heads about it, like, oh, I'm going through this like crazy change, I got to shave my head or something like this, or like it becomes kind of like erratic. I've just seen people have done it, and then it's kind of like an emotional decision. So it's more pointed to, like, wait out the waves, be mindful with the process. Like for me, I've told this story before when I made my joking hair post or whatever, how I grew my hair, because now it's like close to my waist or whatever. It's been 4 or 5 years, and I just had a vision. I had a vision of what my hair looked like, and then a few months ago, I had another vision. It was past my waist. So I've only been guided by these visions, and I've only gone by what I've naturally, intuitively felt and seen. So it wasn't like I'm doing it because I want to develop these abilities, or this wasn't ever really the conversation. It just happened. So yeah. If you want to keep on this topic, I was just watching a video of yours the other day, and question popped in my head. Yeah, okay, cool. Could you describe your description of what true masculine energy and true feminine energy is? Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I want to like backtrack and say that, like, the terminology true, I don't want to like, because there's probably multiple definitions of what people are going to think, like you ask anyone what tantra is or what meditation is or whatever, and everyone's going to have kind of a similar or also different perception. So, yeah, take it with a grain of salt, obviously, as with everything that I say. So I wouldn't say like true femininity, true masculinity, but the view that I have when it comes to masculinity and femininity, I mean, it's quite a vast topic. You can write a book about it, right? There's a lot of things that we can get into. But when we look at the feminine energy at the foundation, feminine energy is naturally going to be a receptive energy. And so what comes with receptivity? What comes with receptivity is a listening, right? A listening to reality, a sensitivity to reality, more of an empathy or an interconnectivity with reality. And but when I mean reality, all the reality, like nature and people and everything, situations. Femininity is naturally going to be in the moment of feeling, the moment of energy moving. So what is this moment? What is felt now? Not what am I feeling and what can I do about it? Or what am I feeling and how you've done something about it, or what this has caused this, and the judgment that often comes with the acknowledgement of feeling. No, it's just the feeling. It's just this movement of this feeling and this energy. There's naturally a nurturing energy that comes with femininity, right? A nurturing of self, a nurturing of reality. The essence of the expression of femininity is nurturing by its nature, right? Like when you're around someone who really embodies that feminine compassion, right? Because that's another element to it, or the motherly essence. You feel naturally nurtured in their presence, just like you maybe with your own mother, or with someone who represents that for you, or a grandmother, elder, or these various expressions. So there's a natural, nurturing energy, right, that comes with that. there's an energy of trust. Femininity naturally is in a space of trusting, right? It has to be in a place of trusting. That's the only way it actually can tune into these very sensitive and subtle dimensions of being, right? And the gentleness of that, which comes with it, right? There's a gentleness. It's like the feminine essence is the foundation to motherhood, right? Of course. And the only way a mother could be a great mother is if they're gentle. Right? Gentle and compassion are interchangeable, because we can be stern as well, but that gentle compassion is such a foundation. It's the most like subtle, like little dimension of the container which allows for growth. Like when you look at a flower, if it's a rough environment, the flower it's very difficult for that flower to bloom. There has to be such a gentleness. Like think about, like you've just like brushed your hand on a flower and like the petal falls off, like it's just like a baby or like a little puppy. Like the gentleness is so important. So these are some initial energies and expressions that I would say represent that feminine essence. Now when we look at the masculine essence naturally brings a certain focus, a certain concentration, right? Because the concentration is generally going to be in a direction. Masculine energy is generally pointed in a direction, right? There's a certain direction that's in it. That energy comes with a certain strength. It comes with a protective energy, because the masculine energy is the structure by which it protects the gentleness of the feminine, right? And the compassion. So the energy of protection is very much important. And that comes with structure, it comes with logic, it comes with the organization, right? Not just like, okay, I'm going to organize my to-do list or something like this, or organize my house, but the organizational structure of nature itself. Nature is extremely organized, right? And that's that masculine structure, which gives way for the expression of all the feminine qualities of why so many people enjoy nature. But we could not enjoy it if there was not the structure of it, right? So that masculine organizational structure, very important. So the protection layer, right? The focus, the concentration, the strength, because with all of these things comes strength. It's not to say there's not a strength in femininity, but the strength of that masculine energy. There's no doubt the masculine strength. Like if we're going to take a female and a male, and we're going to bring them both to the peak of their strength, we obviously know who's going to be stronger physically, right? So that's very important. Not that we can't be strong in other ways, but because that fractal of just the physical level, it represents itself in different ways. It's very important we acknowledge that within all layers of it, where that masculine energy is the strength, right? It is that determination, the will, the direction of the will, right? Because we could say that the receptivity of choicelessness, of the receptivity of destiny, is very much a more feminine essence of surrender, whilst the free will and the direction of will has that masculine quality as well. And so we're describing two sides of the same coin, really, because they're not separate. They're not two things that happen separately. They all happen simultaneously, right? That it's very important that they happen simultaneously. Like you could not be in a place of trusting and receptivity if you do not also feel protected. If you do not also feel that there's a structure and a container by which that trust and that receptivity can occur. Right? So what else? I mean, there's so many other things I guess I could explain. I'm speaking to it on a very fundamental level too, right? Obviously, we can speak to it in terms of like relationship, or in terms of actual interaction between a male and a female, or a male essence being and a female essence being. But these qualities are naturally what are going to bloom in someone who identifies, say, more as a masculine essence being or a feminine essence being. But it's not that they're going to be devoid of the other qualities. In fact, actually, the other qualities will be on some level like equally cultivated, but there's a natural initial expression that just happens, right? It's like unavoidable, especially within this dimension that we're living in, where, say, we're part of a soul fractal, or say we're part of a twin flame dynamic. I mean, we all are on some level, but that dynamic is going to be split in two, and it will naturally, be split into to express in these kind of different ways. So we are either going to be more of a feminine essence being or a masculine essence being, but our true self surely is going to be a merge of both of them. But in this dimension, in this life now, we're embodying one of them. And so it's important that we come to see that and recognize that. And this has nothing to do with like sexual orientation or these things. That's another conversation that may be different. We're talking about just like the natural essence of our expression. So when we get caught up in the web of traumas, the webs of cultural stigmas, all that shit that's happening with that now, that's what creates a lot of confusion in people, right? Or guilt or shame or all these things about who we naturally feel we are meant to be on some level, or how we're meant to express. So it takes some time, right, to work through all the things in terms of this. But yeah, I hope this makes sense. So this person, Nechama, is saying, my brain thinks of masculinity as the steel frame of a building and the sheetrock and the femininity as the carpet and paint and design within the building. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. They complement each other to make each other a greater sum of the parts. Yeah, for sure. Definitely not separate. Definitely not separate, and definitely cannot be devoid of each other. If they are, it's why we have issues, and it's why we are facing the issues we are facing today in terms of male-female dynamics. Yeah, very cool. I'm happy everyone stayed on this long. It's a longer session for sure, 111. But yeah, certainly some great topics. Yeah, some other good terms. Yeah, leading, discipline. Mm-hmm. In the level 1 course, we talked about compassionate discipline, right? So we're basically speaking to both at the same time, where we see them not as separate. The only way you could actually be compassionate is if you've been disciplined, and the only way you can be disciplined is if you're also compassionate with yourself, right? So if you're only disciplined, that'll run itself dry. If you're only in that place of like expression of compassion, then it's like that kind of soft love, tough love. It's the same thing. If you're too much on the soft love side, then you miss out on some great lessons and with tough love, and vice versa. So it's again, it all weaves together in beautiful ways. Catherine Snell, the music was great, and so were the topics, energy. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. Happy. Thanks for the reflection. Great, Hans. Yeah, happy to hear. Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, sounds good. Coming up on 2 hours now, so a little longer session today, but great session. Had a lot of fun with this one. Always do. What to say? We've said a lot. We've said a lot. This recording obviously will be up on YouTube. Yeah, check out the level 2 course if you want to join in. I mean, if you're not interested in that, I would and you just want to get more deeper in the meditation aspect, especially what we did. Obviously you can read the recording, but the meditation course on Gumroad is another great one. It has like 20 hours plus of recordings from what we've done over the past year. So there's so many resources. I mean, a lot of free stuff, a lot of stuff that you can contribute to as well, which is it's appreciated. But you're well on your way, all of you. You find your way either way, without me or with me or alongside or not alongside. Doesn't matter. We're doing our thing. Mary's asking if I'm doing anything else in person. We may have something in September coming out. I'll keep people in the loop on that. But I feel this is good. All the links are in description and everywhere. You guys can check things out. If you have any personal questions or want to book some one-on-one time, send me a message. I don't have it too much else right now, but if I do, it'll be on social media, as you naturally will see. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Deep love to each of you, and yeah, see ya.